Imagine a planet so similar to Earth that for a long time astronomers believed it could be our twin brother. A planet nearly the same size with a rocky composition and even a dense atmosphere. But as our technology advanced and we managed to peek beneath the thick clouds of this neighboring world, the reality turned out to be brutal. What once seemed like a potential second home revealed itself to be a true planetary hell. This is Venus, and here's why humans will probably never set foot on its surface. Venus is the second planet closest to the Sun, right after Mercury, orbiting at an average distance of 108 million kilometers. That puts it relatively close to Earth. In fact, it's the brightest object in the night sky after the Moon, but that glow hides a terrifying truth. Venus's atmosphere is thick, made mostly of carbon dioxide, and it's wrapped in clouds of sulfuric acid that surround the planet like a corrosive cocoon. Unlike Earth, where clouds reflect and trap heat in a balanced way, Venus's dense cover creates a runaway greenhouse effect. The surface temperature of Venus reaches a staggering 470 C, hot enough to melt lead. This makes it even hotter than Mercury, despite Mercury being much closer to the Sun. On Venus, the heat is so extreme and constant that there are no cool nights or mild mornings. It's like an industrial oven that never shuts off, but heat isn't. The only obstacle, the atmospheric pressure on Venus, is about 92 times greater than Earth's at sea level. That means if you were standing on its surface without protection, you'd be crushed in seconds, as if you were 900 meters underwater. Any equipment, spacesuit, or human-made structure would have to be engineered to withstand this colossal pressure and still function in a temperature that would fry most electronics instantly. And as if that weren't enough, there are sulfuric acid rains. While this acid doesn't reach the surface due to the extreme temperatures, it evaporates before getting that far. Its presence in the upper layers of the atmosphere enough to destroy any unprotected equipment. And there's more. Venus has no liquid water, and its surface is covered with vast volcanic plains, warped mountains, and cracked terrain shaped by extreme geological activity. The landscape, if you could even see it through the thick yellowish atmosphere, would look like something out of a nightmare. Speaking of visibility, sunlight barely reaches the surface. The thick cloud layer blocks almost everything, wrapping the planet in a constant twilight. There, you wouldn't see a blue sky, stars, or even the sun, just an orange, dense, and oppressive environment, like being trapped in a pressurized chamber filled with toxic gas and heat. All of this raises an obvious question. If we've managed to send rovers to Mars, land on the Moon, and even send probes to the far reaches of the solar system, why haven't we set foot on Venus? The answer is simple. Venus remains to this day the most hostile planet ever visited by human probes. Even with all these challenges, humanity has tried to get close to Venus, and most of those attempts were quick and painful. The Soviet Union was a pioneer in Venus exploration during the space race. The Venera series of probes launched between the 1960s and 1980s had the ambitious goal of landing on Venus and sending back data from the surface. And, in fact, some of those probes managed the near miraculous feat of touching down on the planet. But the celebration was short-lived. Venera 7, for example, was the first probe to transmit data directly from the surface of another planet. It survived for only 23 minutes before being completely destroyed by the pressure and heat. Others, like Venera 13, lasted just over 2 hours, long enough to capture color images of Venus's surface and conduct chemical analyses. These historic records showed a flat world covered in flattened rocks with no sign of water or life, a chemical desert under crushing pressure. Since then, few missions have dared to get close to Venus. Most prefer to orbit the planet rather than risk landing. NASA's Magellan mission, and more recently Japan's Akatsuki, brought back detailed images and atmospheric studies that helped us better understand the planet's complex dynamics. But landing again, that's still out of the question, at least with today's technology. And that brings us to an interesting point. Why is it so hard to create technology capable of surviving Venus? After all, we've sent probes to extreme environments like Jupiter, Saturn, and even landed on comets. The difference lies in the type of threat. On Venus, the challenges are combined: extremely high temperatures, crushing pressures, a corrosive atmosphere, and a lack of direct sunlight. Most modern electronic components simply don't work at such high temperatures. Processors, cameras, batteries, everything starts to fail quickly. Materials expand, melt, or break. Spacesuits designed for Mars or the Moon would be completely useless on Venus. They would inflate like balloons under such pressure, and their internal systems would fail within seconds. A human being wouldn't stand a chance. Even robots with reinforced shielding face major limitations. For instance, engineers would need to develop computers made with special components that could operate at 470 C for extended periods. That technology is still in the research and development phase. On top of that, solar panels can't be used effectively on Venus's surface. The thick atmosphere blocks most of the light, and the extreme heat damages standard solar cells. That forces any mission to bring alternative energy systems, which adds weight and complexity. And we haven't even talked about the landing itself. The dense atmosphere makes controlled entry difficult, and high-altitude turbulence can throw off or destroy probes in seconds. Everything needs to be timed with extreme precision. A small miscalculation could mean the total loss of the mission and millions of dollars gone. Given all that, the idea of walking on Venus sounds almost like science fiction. A human base there would have to be completely sealed off with cooling systems that are nearly impossible to maintain. And how would astronauts even step outside? What kind of suit could survive such an environment? As of now, there isn't a single spacesuit capable of withstanding even 1 minute on Venus's surface. That's why even though the planet is just around the corner, only about 40 million km away at its closest approach, it remains out of reach, a forbidden frontier where everything seems to be against human presence. Despite all the obstacles, Venus is still a major focus of scientific interest, precisely because it's so similar to Earth in size and mass. It can teach us a lot about planetary evolution and even about our own future. Many scientists believe that Venus once had oceans, a milder atmosphere, and perhaps even conditions favorable to life billions of years ago. But something went wrong. The greenhouse effect spiraled out of control. The oceans evaporated, and the planet entered a deadly feedback loop that turned everything into permanent climate chaos. Studying this process is essential. After all, Venus might be our cosmic red flag, a warning of what could happen to Earth if we ignore the signs of global warming. Some scientists call Venus the dark mirror of our planet, and that makes every piece of data collected from there even more valuable. But if walking on the surface is impossible, is there another way to explore Venus safely? The answer might be above the clouds. Literally, around 50 to 60 kilometers above the surface, there's a layer of Venus's atmosphere where temperatures and pressures are relatively similar to those on Earth. It's the only hospitable region on the entire planet. There, balloons or airships could float and carry out research for long periods, far from the crushing heat and pressure below. This idea gave rise to a futuristic concept called cloud cities, floating cities above Venus. While still a distant vision, it's considered more feasible than building bases on Mars or even on the Moon. Imagine structures floating in a dense layer of clouds, collecting data, studying the atmosphere, and maybe even hosting human crews on temporary missions. It would be a clever way to explore a deadly planet without ever touching it directly. Even so, these proposals face huge challenges. The support systems, materials, protection against sulfuric acid, and energy supply would need engineering breakthroughs we haven't achieved yet, and even if one day we manage to orbit, float above, or study Venus safely, putting a human on its surface remains completely out of the question. The irony is striking. Venus is closer to Earth than Mars, easier to reach from an energy standpoint, and its orbit offers more frequent launch windows. In theory, it should be an ideal candidate for a crewed mission. But in practice, it's the worst possible destination, a place where the environment itself destroys any attempt to approach. A planet that reminds us that space, for all its wonder, wasn't made to welcome us with open arms, and it's precisely this mix of familiarity and hostility that makes Venus so enigmatic. It draws us in by resembling Earth and then pushes us away with the full force of its atmospheric brutality. What's left is curiosity. We'll keep sending probes, collecting remote data, and dreaming of alternatives. But as far as we know today, no matter how much our technology advances in the coming years, Venus's surface will remain off-limits to humans. That's why, unlike the Moon or Mars, no one will ever walk on Venus, not even for a minute, and in a way that only reinforces how special our own planet really is, a cosmic oasis surrounded by unforgiving neighbors. If you love exploring the mysteries of the solar system and discovering why space is so fascinating and so dangerous, subscribe to the channel right now. Around here, the journey never stops. With every video, a new trip to the edge of the impossible,